Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Paul Cochrane. Today's topic is the media and creative landscape in the Muslim world. This is part of the Global Islamic Economy Report webinar series organized by Salaam Gateway and Dina Standard with the Global Islamic Economy Summit and supported by the Dubai Islamic Economy Development Center. We've got panelists with us today from North America, the Middle East, Asia, Australia, or covering those areas and from those and bringing in those cultural aspects from that. So sort of covering essentially a lot of the world. We have Peter Gould. He's a designer and creative entrepreneur and current CDO of Gould Design. He's joining us from Australia. So he's nearly burning the midnight oil to join us. So thank you. Peter's an innovative, award-winning work. Is highly sought after globally, and he's touched millions with positive, inspirational projects. And he's won many, many awards. We also have Sinan Ismail. He is the CEO and founder of Digital Durian. Sinan's mission is to make people happy. And he's doing so by creating fun and meaningful content for young children. Digital Durian's first show, Didi and Friends, had 2.8 billion views on YouTube and more than 3.8 million subscribers. And it's been dubbed into 7 languages. The second show, Omar and Hannah, has had 1.3 billion views on YouTube. There's more than 3.3 million subscribers, and it's in English, Arabic, and Malay. And then we have Omar Tom, commonly known as OT. He's the founder and managing partner of Cochrane Media, which is a marketing and cultural consultancy that's known in the industry as a leader in contemporary Middle Eastern culture. OT's worked with a range of brands across the Middle East and San Francisco, such as Nike, Dubai Sports Council, Google, YouTube, and Converse. And he's also a lecturer at the American University in Dubai on strategic planning and opportunities in new media. Now, I just want to mention a few things about the sort of Muslim-themed media space, which has been developing very quickly over the last few years. And there's been quite a lot of developments this year and over the past year, despite everything that's happened with COVID, which we're covering and will be out in the State of the Global Islamic Economy Report 2019-2020. That'll be out in a month too. And we're seeing developments coming now from all over the Muslim world, but also a big shift has been a lot more interest from mainstream media providers, be that CNN, Facebook, Netflix, particularly buying up content, be it from the Middle East or Asia or Africa, and telling different stories from what they would, which is great developments. And we've also had some huge examples of success this year, such as the Turkish series Gould, which is about the early Ottoman Empire. And that was dubbed into Urdu and was watched by 133 million people on state-run Pakistan TV and its YouTube channel. This year we also saw the launch of Al Mirrah, which is the first ever Arab soap on Saudi Arabia's NBC. And we also just launched around now is Malaysia's Netflix, which is a Muslim-themed streaming platform. So that's the new development. There are other Muslim-themed streaming platforms. And that's aiming to attract over 1 million subscribers in its first year. So there's just a couple of little examples for that. So we're going to be hearing a lot more about the media and creative landscape in the Muslim world from our participants. And this is a sector that's valued at over $200 billion. We're not going to have a Q&A at the end, but the audience can send in questions for participants, and we will address them and to the relevant person. So I'm going to start with Peter, as it's pushing on near midnight there. Peter, you've been described by the BBC as among those young, urban, global Muslims leading the emergence of a new Muslim cool. Where are we along the sort of spectrum of Muslim cool when it comes to Islamic-themed media content and design?
Well, thanks, Paul. It's great to join everyone and be looking forward to the chat. Good. Don't worry about the time here because Australians, one thing we have is good coffee. So, it will keep the time, no problem at all. I'll be happy to chat. And it's a great question. I think we're at a really, really exciting time. We're seeing this flourish globally of many promising ventures, startups, a lot of media efforts from both the grassroots, but also at a, serious kind of institutional kind of level now. And I think we've seen this slow build over some years as the demand from, people like younger parents looking for, a wholesome content for their kids. We're seeing it from just, people, a large youthful population just demanding culturally relevant, appropriate, programming that isn't just an older model of just import and dub. It's and also access, of course, to the tools and the technologies that enable people that the barrier to entry is lower. So you have all these different factors happening, and you see the rise of these really promising, exciting brands and platforms happening. So you see that both in across different sectors, and from, of course, we've seen that in fashion and food, famously, and big numbers there, that you see in the reports that you mentioned, and the Global Islamic Economy report that comes out. But I think some of the success stories there have then sort of sparked up this global conversation. So if you look at brands like Modernisa coming out of Turkey, expanding, but then Oud Hijab in New York City, and seeing how in North America Oud Hijab has become this really powerful cultural kind of especially even during COVID this year in the US, what the brand has done, and really stepping up to get a lot of mainstream press and coverage. So the cultural clout that comes with not just designing in a particular niche or a bubble, but really Muslim-centered brands benefiting wider, having wider appeal. So you have those kind of things happening, but they're inspired from a certain place that have meaning and resonate with people. I think other good examples, for even in the US as well, a brand like Launch Good. So Launch Good comes from a kind of a grassroots team, and I happen to know the founders, and my team, full disclosure, our team does a lot of design for Launch Good, but we really align in terms of the values and the vision. They've had now over 1 million users. In Ramadan alone, for example, they helped raise over $32 million US for a whole range of causes. And you see this beautiful global heartbeat of the Muslim community and beyond, supporting many causes. And you have this sense of connectedness and togetherness and opportunity to do good together and people be involved. So I think that's sort of a good example of this, looking at this landscape, and Launch Good being one of those brands. And others, there's many good examples. I think on the call, we've got Sinan from Digital Durian, and his incredible efforts and his team in making this beautiful, fun, wholesome content that parents appreciate and kids love. And you're talking billions of views. So, I think you've got a really nice panel, and, you see efforts like Alchemia, creating a platform that's, enabling a lot of Muslim-centric content. It's all responding to demand. And you've had this both growth from people just making it themselves. I think it's captured well in, Shalina Jan Muhammad's book, Generation M. And she talks about a lot of big brands not necessarily having visibility on the opportunities. And then so just a generation of makers and entrepreneurs and creators just doing it themselves. But now you have, of course, attention from bigger brands and investments happening in, definitely in places like fintech and others. So broadly speaking, it's an exciting time. And it's very fertile ground. I think, there's a lot of opportunity, but also it's a time we can do good. Like this year is a chance to go within, look at what we're about, and do good with this work, not just business and numbers and sustainable, successful stories, but, what can we bring to the world? When we talk about Islamic themed content, it's not just how it looks and the cultural references, but what values are we bringing, to the work?
I think with a lot of these developments that have been happening, there's a sort of a need for greater synergies. I mean, those synergies are taking place, but to really sort of push and have more collaborations to push the sector forward. I mean, we're seeing that within some sectors, but it's not fully taken off. I mean, what would you like to see?
Yeah, well, I think, this year in particular, it's a beautiful opportunity that we all can kind of pause and take a look, and we're all, one of my teachers put it, we're all in the same storm, not in the same boat necessarily, but it is an opportunity to look within and look at what the meaning and purpose of what we're creating. And the older conventional models of things don't necessarily have to work and just be this linear path of what is created, the role of brands. Brands is becoming, more relevant in terms of their active, their statements, and what is a brand's influence on a particular issue. So, I think, the brands that are winning have to do a lot more listening, and they have to take on, they're not just about producing a good and trying to make a, ads that create emotional connection. It's like the ones that are winning are doing something more meaningful and authentic, that are resonating with people. And there's a lot of the younger generation coming through, have a different, decision-making process, different tools that they're getting exposure to different platforms, and it's a different. It's really not just following a linear model of like, oh, this is how a brand reaches. So in terms of collaborations, I just, I love the fact that there's people that I've come across in Bandung, Jakarta, making these really cool, pieces that then can spread to, 250 million people in Indonesia, but then also be appreciated by someone in Riyadh or Jeddah or in San Francisco or in London. And there's these, this potential for this, digital conversations and sharing of creative work and ideas, and you see these mashups of ideas. Then, people are actually going and starting their own, making their own efforts for building a little platform or an app. You see plenty of entrepreneurs trying, and they're not necessarily bringing the Silicon Valley mindset and model of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to scale and build a team and get funding. There's some of these ideas, but it's also just coming from places like, I want to build something, and getting this organic traction and seeing how things go. So, it's a fun time. It's a time of opportunities. And it's both from the grassroots level and, these bigger companies taking note that they have to listen. And if they want to stay relevant, they've got to navigate all of this now.
And where sort of as a designer, does that fit in? I mean, from Arabic fonts to calligraphy, Islamic design, to pushing that and bringing all these synergies and all this different talent and cultural perspectives and different backgrounds within a sort of more universal theme, should we say, universal stories?
Yeah, well, I think that what's really central here to anyone that's in this space or anyone on listening in is really having a deeper authentic understanding of when we start talking about Islamic design or designing for Muslim audiences, or looking at this rather than only seeing it as an opportunity and as a market. I mean, of course that is there. You look at the numbers, it's clear. But also looking at, okay, well, what are the values and approaches that we can bring to our creative work? So, for example, traditionally, if you look at Islamic and design art, you think of beautiful spaces like Alhambra. You think of calligraphy, of tiling, of mosaic. The love and ihsan and beauty brought into objects and spaces that resonate with people. They feel this emotional connection that has stood centuries. This legacy is there. You can feel that. Now, that's come about through a heart-centered approach to design. That's come about through, ikhlas, sincerity in the work, through niyyah, understanding design with, barakah, designing for blessing, understanding, your opportunities or your talents and your creative inspiration is gifted to you as an amana, as a trust to serve people and make beautiful things. So all these things that were understood traditionally in Islamic design that resulted in all this great work and these beautiful things being done, that hasn't stopped. That isn't stuck in centuries old. Those concepts and aspirations we can have as creative people, as entrepreneurs, are more and more relevant. In fact, we can bring a lot of meaning and purpose to our tech projects, to our design projects, to our cultural and creative aspirations. So I think Islamic design has a great opportunity to really look at our tradition, look at what spiritual aspirations we can bring to our design efforts. And that, to me, is really exciting too, because there's starting increasingly people aware of what the tech companies and products have possibly negative things coming there. We need to bring more accountability and design and heart into what we're making. So I think when you talk about Islamic design, it's not just the visual cultural design of beautiful Arabic or mosaic work. They're the visual kind of cues that have this thread of significance, but what's the meaning behind them, how we arrived at those things. So but definitely in terms of the visual work and looking at things like Arabic fonts and the relationship with Arabic typography and that growth, I think some of the exciting things have happened. For example, El Cid is a well-known sort of pioneer of what we'd call calligraffiti kind of movement that starting 10 years ago and more now is well known and loved in every from the streets of Paris to to New York to KL or Australia. So I think actually probably Omar on the call could talk more directly about how that's becoming more relevant and fresh. But you're seeing this flourish now globally of these things.
Yeah, to jump in here, I think that like, and knowing Asid and seeing his work here globally, but also I think visiting his gallery and seeing his environment and the family in the space. And we were lucky enough to get a chance to speak to him actually a few years back on our podcast, where he shared a lot of insights about his work and his journey and what he's been through. And really, it was for somebody that did not also speak Arabic, grew up in France, where French is his mother tongue, and then taking the time to learn Arabic, but also go into basics of, okay, Arabic calligraphy, what's that like? How is that drawn? Learning the letterings and the styles and educating himself in that process, and then making that his own. So, learned the rules, learned the basics, and then taking it and marrying it with the street culture that he grew up around, the love of hip hop culture and graffiti, and using that to share beautiful pieces with the world. Sometimes it's poets written by certain people, statements from Islamic culture and learnings to share messages of peace, to share messages of love and ihsan and solidarity and togetherness, and having communal narrative. And that drove a lot of the street artists and graffiti artists in the region to adopt that themselves. Where, for example, there's Majid from Mecca, who a lot of his work is about pieces that he's using, certain old school New York 1970s hip hop styles of graffiti, but he's writing Arabic scripts and sort of marrying these two universes. And people like Dia today, Jeddah has the first and probably the only street art graffiti supply store. The cans, the pens, the markers, the books, and they teach kids as well, have creative classes, design, art classes, and Dia and his partners that run, it's called Dog Store. So even then, the naming of the store itself, dog, taking the letter from the Arabic language, which is, what it's known for, and celebrating that. This resurgence of it has been growing massively, where now we're seeing an adoption of that from walls to iPads and Wiacoms, if you will, where we're seeing they're using that now in illustration design and logo and branding design as well, where a lot of it, including ourselves, we worked with a branding team here that focused on Arabic visual design, on how do we want to package our branding, and the focus is Arabic, and Islamic design taking the forefront, for example, and English taking a backseat to honor the Islamic art and to honor the style. And I was speaking to an architect friend of mine not too long ago, where they're talking about using arabesque design and certain Islamic patterns, and what is the new simplistic design and simplification of Islamic patterns, and using that in architecture and recreating that, giving it a modern twist, if you will. So we're seeing these adoptions constantly coming out of the region and also globally. I think that there's a very clear narrative there where people not only are inspired themselves, but it's finding a way to articulate their own narrative in that new style, and marrying the old and the new and bringing them together in this new world and expressing themselves, really.
Are we seeing that in other creative trends and crossing over into media? Be it from urban youth cultural trends in the Middle East and elsewhere.
So that adoption has been very interesting, where it's in creative media, you're seeing it. For example, Saudi Arabia has been doing a great job at that. And that's something that I wanted to come to as well, where in the naming of, for example, their shows, and I'm talking about online digital content creators rather than the traditional incumbents of the creative industry, but rather the new kids on the block and younger content creators, where they've been pushing a lot of that visual style. They're using it in expression of the name of the show, for example, or how they brand their shows and how they tell their stories. We're seeing independent, narrative-driven creatives that are following not only necessarily an Islamic piece of the conversation, but also who are we? How are we changing the global narrative about us? Because there's stereotypes, there's certain perspectives that people have of this part of the world, and especially being politicized. So then how do you counter that? Fighting fire with fire doesn't work. So then you find creative, artistic ways, messages of peace and love, and really sort of welcome to my home kind of approach where let me show you my world. And that has been a great way of really positioning that and making these statements in their work.
And this is, I mean, this is modernizing, pushing things in a different direction. I mean, in some ways, a lot of Muslim themed content is often quite historical, or it goes up to the last, 3, 4, 5 decades ago, but there's not always a lot set very contemporary or futuristic or even sci-fi and stuff like that. But I mean, so we're slowly starting to see this play in. I mean, where would you like to sort of see things go, and do you think there should be more of a focus on?
For me, I think the focus should always is authenticity first. And this goes to all the young Arab, Muslim, not just Arab, but I mean Muslim creatives and content creators around the world. Really, what's your authentic story? Where is your piece in this? What is it that we're trying to say that is really who we are and what it is that you're going through? And original narrative. I think that a lot of people are tapping into, as you've mentioned, the old historic content. We've seen it with TV shows, we've seen it with films, and constantly. And Ramadan every year, like clockwork, there's some historic TV show that's gonna pop up, right? But now the challenge is that what are you into, right? And I think a lot of the teens and the young kids and the young Arab content creators, I mean, not just kids, but like, what is your story like? And there are people that are leading that so powerfully in this region. Telfaz 11, which used to be a YouTube MCN and a content creation group, they've moved from that to hosting the first ever Saudi Film Festival in Hollywood. So they're finding ways to export their culture. Middle East was notorious for being importers of global cultures, and through soft policy, films, music, TV shows, etc. Now it's, okay, how do we export our culture? How do we share our narrative with the world? And what's the right way to do that? So that's how they tackled it. And today, for example, they have, you can find their series on Netflix called 6 Windows, which is 6 short films that they've created that are Saudi first in their language, subtitled to English. And this is one of the things that I admire them for, is that if you're not translating it and subtitling it, then you're speaking in an echo chamber. So now that it's subtitled in English, people get to see your world and you're inviting them in that sense. And these short films are just great stories that are new and original to the Saudi landscape. And when you create something that is that honest, people gravitate to it. There's a sudden interest and hunger and thirst. And Saudi was not known in this part of the world to be a content creator the way, for example, Egypt historically and Lebanon have been. So now you're starting to see people understand Saudi dialect in a way that they didn't before because of that kind of content. Now there's a connection. We understand each other. We know what you're saying. You're understanding cultural nuances and and Islamic pieces that are felt to be, might have been alien to other people. Now they're getting it. You're connecting it through humor, you're connecting it through drama, you're connecting it through rom-com, and really just creating this new world of this is what it's like here. And it's just plain honest, comical, witty way that is now connecting the dots for people. And I know that's part of not only an advice, I think, to the creators, but also to the buyers as well, of like, by the way, there are people creating that. These pieces do exist. There are people creating original narratives that are definitely worthy of your attention. And nothing connects people better than human stories. I think an example of that I've recently seen is Rami, which is an American show. So Rami is an Egyptian-American comedian that wrote a story about himself, really. It was a series on Hulu. And in that series, he highlights the American secular lifestyle and the Muslim and the clash that he has internally, trying to be a better Muslim, but then the worldly sins and things attracting him and pulling him the other way. And I think there's something very beautiful in that honesty of, this is what I deal with. It's a comedy series, it's just a TV show, but once you see that conflict in him, is very fascinating of how he expresses that. made for an American audience to connect them and humanize the perspectives of Muslims around the world.
Is there also a possibility, I mean, to bring in other cultural developments? I mean, from, you know, K-pop being very popular in the Middle East to, I mean, to also with manga, anime, and then, you know, regionalize it or, you know, universalize it in some ways as well, or Islamize it as well.
Definitely. I mean, here, so, I mean, Korean culture and K-pop has been doing really, really well here over the past 10 years. Plus, we've been seeing a lot of people adopting it and getting really excited by it, to the point where you have a lot of Arab kids now speak Japanese and speak Korean because of the shows that they've been watching, the music that they're listening to. Korean and Turkish shows are dubbed in Arabic, and they're across NBC and all the other large TV networks in the region, where there's a hunger for it. And what I found to be really interesting were the kids that will take that and then create something new in that same form of art. So it'll be, for example, as an Emirati story about a police officer, and it's a dramatized story, but then the style of storytelling, the artwork that has been done, the drawing, the over dramatization of certain moments that in reality is a couple of seconds, but on the show it takes 5 minutes, right? So like that kind of approach has been recreated, and then it's in Arabic. But you see them taking these learnings, but because we grew up on that kind of content without knowing. The Captain Majid, the Conan cartoons, and what we'd usually watch as kids here, and the cartoons we consumed were always anime that just happens to be dubbed in Arabic. And so that culture was very easy to understand and connect to in that way. And now they're using that to create their own pieces. We have also Emirati creators now, also even Saudi creators, where their characters are being created not just for shows, but mascots, representations for different businesses or government entities, and these characters follow the same artistic style that they're using that. And when we look at Korean culture and the shows, not only is it adopted as language, and I've used this example earlier, I was teaching a podcast class at the American University, and 2 girls came up to me at the end of the class wanting to understand how they can improve their show, because they're creating a Korean podcast, a Sudanese and an Emirati girl from the Middle East creating a show in Korean. And that is just based on them. When we had a conversation, they loved K-pop and they loved Korean shows, and they realized there's more like them. So it's a show that breaks down other shows and breaks down the music and talks about these things in Korean and Arabic. And I thought that was so fascinating. And now they're one of the leading shows. So these interests we're seeing that in demand and supply on both ends.
Thank you, Ati. I mean, and moving on to like demand and supply, I mean, we're seeing quite a clear demand for people to watch Omar and Hannah. Sinan, I'd like to ask you a bit about the popular children's cartoon, and why have you not heard of more sort of globally successful Islamic children's cartoons?
Right. Cool. Thanks. Really insightful discussion so far, guys. I think to answer your question, to be honest, the reality is we're very traditional in a way, in terms of always wanting to preach. And when it comes to Islamic cartoons, and the tradition has always been, we need to preach. We need to teach the religion, right? But Islam is much more than that. It's not just about preaching and teaching. It's actually, Islam is a way of life, right? And that's what we brought into Omar and Hannah. And it doesn't have to be that only. I mean, you can have football shows, football cartoons, right? But having Islamic values in it. So I think there's that gap there where we always, when it comes to Islamic cartoons, it has to be educational. And I totally agree with Peter when he mentioned that it's all about what value do you create for your clients or for your fans or for your viewers, right? And we kind of like tend to forget that our viewers are kids, right? They love entertainment, and they can choose between watching any show on YouTube or any show on Netflix or on TV compared to what an Islamic show is doing. So we're competing against them, to be honest, right? We need to create high quality, fun, entertaining cartoons with a good Islamic message or a value in there. So I think that's one main point which I see that what was lacking in the previous generations of Islamic cartoons. But saying that, now there's quite a few. Of course, there's Omar Hana, there's Nusa from Indonesia, right? There's also I think, what's the name again? Ghulam Rasul, which is just maybe 6-8 months old, from Pakistan, and it's in Urdu. So these cartoons are doing very well. Of course, you have Zaki from Australia, and who's kind of like one of the pioneers in this industry. And I think one big gap also is actually investment, right? So when we do Islamic cartoons, we've always had that challenge of monetizing it, and how do you sustain it? Because to build, to develop, or to produce a high quality Islamic cartoon, or any high quality cartoon, it's about funding. And not many of us producers actually know how or believe that when you create a cartoon, you can actually create money around it to sustain the business and to create more value for people. And so I think that's one big gap which is also there, and not just for the producers, but also for investors, because to produce a TV show, a cartoon, is possibly around 1 to 2 million USD per season, right? And that's basically also saying it's much cheaper compared to what the Hollywoods are producing. But then you sell the show for $2,000 to a TV station, and for one episode, then it doesn't make mathematical sense. It still doesn't, if I talk to any investor, right? But cartoons are actually IPs, and I think this is the difference which we see, and a lot of new producers see. And it's not just there for kids to consume the content, but it's there for kids to consume the content, learn from it, and build worlds around it. I mean, products and other things which can be of value to them, right? So Peter Gould, he had Salaam sisters, for example, and so Omar Hana, we have plush toys. Why? Because we want the kids to have a friend, have a companion, and to in a way role model Omar Hana. For example, we have books, because it's important not to have the kids just glued on the screen, but to have them in different forms where they can actually learn. So what we do in our content is always, we make it 90-10, 90% entertainment, 10% with a touch of good education, moral values, Islamic values. And when it comes to books, the other way around, right? So I think that's one of the challenges, and why Islamic cartoons in the past haven't been there. But I think there's not only just cartoons coming up. Of course, there's platforms. There's Ali Huda. There's Muslim Kids TV, and I totally agree again with Peter when he said that it's a really exciting time. The borders are open now. I mean, you're talking about, okay, the borders are closed, but the world is open, right? I mean, if we created Omar and Hana basically 10 years ago, I don't think we would be where we are today without the digital platforms and without the reach which we can actually get now. So it's a very exciting time to be producing content. And I believe that there's still so much more growth in Islamic children's cartoons or Islamic content for kids, right? Not just cartoons, even live action. And
if I can also just build on that, Sinan, I think where the opportunity is not for us just to follow the model of, okay, this is animation, there's merchandise, and let's follow the kind of Disney model. There's also the opportunity now in 2020 and beyond, because there's opportunities to create more hybrid types of digital experiences. We can be creative in what we actually build. So the business models themselves can be experimental. What is a combination of a physical experience? Maybe it's a box subscription thing, plus there's some animated premium content, plus there's some exclusive online things that you view, a bit of educational access, a bit of fun, just mindless gaming for a little bit of time. I mean, these things need to be designed. So the heart of that is the design. The teams that are able to have the design teams that understand what the parents want, but what the kids love to do, and then manage to align the design talent and resources and funding to do that. It's quite a few pieces together. But I'm convinced, and I think others are starting to be, that the companies that get those things lined up will do very well. You know why? Because there are millions upon millions of families that are desperate and thirsty for those things. And they're paying a lot of money right now for Disney Plus and their Netflix and whatever. And that's fine. But like, you know, there are real opportunities to create something beautiful, meaningful, but very, you know, lucrative for people that, you know, that if that's your, you know, if that's what it takes. So aligning those teams to do those things, when you talk about the landscape, it's really promising. It's just a matter of time, but who's going to be, you know, the ones putting we've got all the ingredients, guys. We just got to work together, find the right ways to do it. You know, very promising few years ahead.
Sinan, I mean, do you think that's going to happen through more Islamic streaming channels, or, I mean, could you tell me, I mean, I know you've had some issues with YouTube and streaming content, and you've launched an app as a result. Could you tell us more about that? Because that's quite an issue with monetizing.
Yeah, I think for us, we always started with YouTube, right? So the traditional way was always going to broadcasters. And 6-7 years ago, we got rejected by most, or basically all of them. And the good news is that, hey, YouTube is there, so we kind of like started on YouTube. And we grew on YouTube, and we've been getting, again, millions and millions of views, million subscribers, until this year, where COPPA law was enforced, and YouTube got fined by the US government. And then basically YouTube couldn't serve ads to children's channels, targeted ads to children's channels. So the impact to us was basically a 60 to 70% drop of revenues in one day. And it was devastating to see the numbers. For us, the team is now 130 people, and a lot of families to feed, and it's like, whoa, man, this is something. And but again, through challenges come always there's opportunity, and there's ways to look at it, right? So we launched our own app. We developed it for kind of like 7 to 8 months. We just launched it 2 months ago, and now we've just hit 1,000 plus subscribers, more than 40,000 downloads in 2 months. I think it's doing pretty well, alhamdulillah. But it's definitely a challenge. But as I really see it in Malaysia, I mean, going global, digital is always the easiest way. It's the first touch point, right? But in Malaysia, our revenues are not just from content. And so basically 70% of our revenues is actually off the screen. When I mentioned about merchandise, we actually work with brands and to promote good values, right? We work with publishers, and we do collaborations. So I think, and also events. And because again, you did mention what Digital Durian does. We make people happy, right? So for me, again, as an entrepreneur, but also as a human being, I like to create the value of making people happy. And when these kids and parents come to the events, and just to see the happy faces and the family moments they create, and I think that's something special for me. And hopefully, we just don't do it in Malaysia. We're almost going to do something in Turkey this year. Right, of course, with COVID, that didn't happen. Probably doing something in the UK end of this year, but again, that had to stop. But again, challenges are always there. And streaming platforms, again, I think the likes of Al Huda, Muslim Kids TV, they're doing great. But the reality is we don't have enough producers actually creating quality Islamic content to actually sustain to be a big alternative to the Netflixes and Disney Pluses, right? So I think there's still room for creators to create more cartoons, and even for ourselves to actually create more cartoons. And because we only have 2 now, DDM Friends is a global one, right? And Omahane is more skewed to Islamic, but again, we want to create a bigger slate of cartoons. And challenges of monetizing is one thing. And I think the challenge of actually developing and creating the content is also another. And because again, it's a big investment. And at least for us now, we're looking for investors in a way, and to rationalize the potential of Omar Hana and creating more IPs. And because if you ask me, just to share some numbers, if you ask me 2 years ago when we launched our Omar Hana English channel, and I wouldn't believe if I was saying it now, 500,000 subscribers, and 95% of those views are not from Malaysia. And so it's like, wow, I mean, how did we actually get viewers from all around the world?
I remember having that conversation, Sinan, early on, and it was, because you're so strong in Malaysia domestically, and then Southeast Asia, and then, but I think that's exactly goes to the heart of what we're talking about, between what Omar has been sharing globally, and the demand is there. And that, we're in an era, we have the opportunity to connect, we have the platforms, there are an increase in content creators, it's only going to take the right, I think, people, we hope with the right intention, the right approach to connect more of these pieces together. There's this collectiveness of it. And even in gaming, for example, I mean, we always see big numbers in gaming and, the content being consumed by so many young people. And of course, we see the dangers of that as well, if they're designed for addiction and designed for distraction, but can we also design, understand the formulas of what's being used, the design tools, but can we create beautiful experiences that are meaningful, that, are at least aware of the spiritual, well-being we hope we could instill through some of the things we're designing, creating, or at least, open better questions to, not just design purely for clicks and attention. What else can we design for? So these things will I'm sure converge in the coming years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what values do we create, right?
That's it. That's right.
Is there a danger, Peter, of there maybe being too much quality instead of quantity? I mean, you need to sort of balance the both, right? I mean, there isn't enough materials, you're saying right now. I mean, but it needs to be high quality, but also enough out there to keep a streaming platform, a channel going, and that's been part of the issue.
I think when you talk about quality, right, it doesn't mean quality also means storytelling, right? It just doesn't mean visually putting 3D animation and sophisticated sophisticated movements and things. It's the quality. What I mean is also in terms of storytelling. In like Omar mentioned about authenticity, and there's so many stories to be told, and from different cultures all around the world. But if we don't know, or if we don't invest in actually finding the best way to tell these stories, and they won't be presented in a way which is which people like to consume. And again, even though they are Islamic content, we feel that people should watch Islamic content, but they don't have to. They have a choice again. And so the storytelling, how we tell the story, the direction, the art behind it, and that's what I mean by quality. I mean, so quality versus quantity, there's a lot of quantity out there. I think we need to take more, put more investment into actually putting that quality in. And the market is huge. All of us know that. And like Peter said, there's so many families and kids hungry for not just content but also products. And so the opportunities are huge, and with the internet and all the platforms, and the world is getting smaller and easier to reach, right? There's a lot of opportunities now, but quality has to be that we cannot take because it's Islamic content, the quality can be lower now, and the consumers have a choice. And we used to say that they control the remote. Now it's just a flick of the finger, right? To change content. So it's even tougher by getting the right mix between entertainment and education, and really understanding what your viewers want. I think that's one thing which we cannot miss when Islamic producers do their content.
If I may echo that as well, like, yeah, I think you've hit on the nail. It is edutainment, right? It's education, entertainment, because we're at a time where, and this is something we speak about a lot, I think from a communications point of view as well in the industry of, we're asked, the currency is attention, right? That's what we're asking for. I'm asking for your time and attention, whether it's from little kids, teenagers, young adults, is stop scrolling and see what I have to say, right? And in that moment, whatever I'm presenting needs to be worthy of that attention, because now you have unlimited options out there. So we have to step up our quality to match that. And then at least then that trade-off, the consumer or the viewer feels that trade-off is fair to them.
Peter, anything to add there?
Yeah, no, I mean, just, no, the combination, like, it's interesting. Just look at even the geographic diversity in the call and what we're each observing. I mean, one thing that I think we all kind of see anecdotally, if you're in this space, is you see and hear the same kind of conversations. And but just on the ground, any parent will tell you, I mean, many, to see in even the last year, like a lot of growth of availability of content in, let's say, Omar and Hannah, right? But there's only so many times the parents will want to hear that same song. It's like we need, to invest in more IP. I'm a big believer in, investing in the right. We also have the creative talent. So you only go somewhere to, like, Indonesia or where, or of course, like Omar was saying, across Saudi or MENA, North Africa, you see amazing emerging talent. Talent's there. They've got access to tools, technology. They're not waiting for, like, some big corporation to, like, create the avenue. They're just making the content. But there's still, a few pieces that need to come together. I think it's just how we are navigating that. So the people that are watching, that are in the space, I think, they're the ones that, putting a few of these things together. I mean, even people like Steve Jobs talked about, creativity is just combining things. So if you hear what Omar was saying at the start, okay, you have this generation of people making the stories, making beautiful content, great story, illuminating and reaching hearts from wherever they are. Yeah, people like Sinan saying, yeah, we're creating a lot of content, but the current platform and paradigm, the way we've got to share through YouTube, there's limitations. You've got others talking about platforms like, Ali Huda or Alchemia. Alchemia is very interesting. They've had a journey. They've just rebooted. They were through Amazon Prime. They've just rebooted their own platform, subscriber-based model. You look at the content there, and it's, even though in this current early cycle, that's really promising. There's a lot of content there that's being sourced from different places, a few originals. Now you put these things together, you're having all these ingredients for big success stories. I think it's just going to take the right approach, the right resources, a little bit of a leap of faith, a little bit of risk, a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit the same way. And I think some of the makers and teams that feel, that have been doing it for a while, get a little bit frustrated because they're like, hey, why all the big institutions, and why, where is the funding to support the makers and the creatives and the people that really are passionate, they've got the talent, they know the market's there, but the safer bet is let's just go invest, in Uber or Airbnb or Disney stock or whatever. That's the sort of, so I guess it's a call from all the creative makers, the people designing with heart out there, is like, okay, let's get a bit of love from the investment community, because we will work hard to serve the community, to make the content, to make the platforms, the entrepreneurs that will dedicate their life to making this happen. But we need this bit of the right people working together. And I'm convinced we'll make something beautifully good and benefit a lot of people that in a time the world really needs just kind of wholesome, beautiful content. That was my big rant. Sorry, everyone. That was my call. That was the manifesto.
It's real. It's real. I mean, there's so much effort and so much impact which has already been created, and we're bootstrapping ourselves, right? And I totally agree with you. And and the market is huge, and it's just a matter of taking that leap of faith. And it's much, the leap of faith, to be honest, for me now, is back to its beta nowadays, right? If it was 10 years ago, I think we weren't as strong as we are now. But not we, as in not just digital web, I'm talking as an Islamic creative industry. And so I think we've grown so much, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years, but promising signs, definitely.
Yeah. It's in the report. I mean, some people on the call as well might be following, but if you look at every year, the State of the Global Islamic Report, that's beautifully put together by Dinar Standard, shared with Salaam Gateway, and supported by DIDC, who helped, host even what we're on. There's a lot of effort and research that goes into that, and it shows the data consistently, and it shows that, in the Islamic media and kind of recreation space, for digital media, there's tremendous demand there, tremendous opportunity, there's activity there, but what's been missing, is a bit of love from the investment community to do that. And it seems like it's mostly been high net worth individuals that are kind of aligned on value. At the same time, the makers and the creators and the entrepreneurs, we do need to upskill. We need to learn from what's working globally. We need to create the startups and the business models that are attractive, that are, that have the leadership, that have the, the creative capability to deliver. And it's you can't just you put your heart into something and say, we're going to do it great. We're going to, put these values into it. You have to know the industry, the model. You have to have, ideally experience. The good news is I think there's a really amazing emerging generation of people that do have more professional experience creatively, and do have the right kind of combinations of support, mentorship, entrepreneurial opportunities and platforms that will, make, be more attractive to investors to make it happen.
On that point, Peter, of the sort of the understanding side, and that's something that you and OT and Sinan are all sort of doing. We have some questions from the audience relating to some of these issues, like things can be quite sensitive from a sort of Sharia compliant perspective. Is there a fine line between what's allowed and what's not, and how do you, when you're appealing to massive universal audiences, and also we're not dealing with a homogenous consumer here, different cultures and areas. I mean, how do you overcome that? And that was asked by a couple of people there.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's and each person will probably relate to that, in the audience they most serve and who they're going for. But I think being aware, and if we're really thinking about Islamic design that's authentic and serving Muslim communities and mainstream communities, it's got to come from a place of intentionality, and a place of sincerity. And that means, I think, having the right kind of guidelines, the right kind of understanding of what you're doing. In terms of very specific things and difference of opinion about one piece of content and another, it's something you got to navigate. And even among different regions, of course, to have a show talking about hijab in Indonesia versus Turkey, for example, or so there's you obviously have to be aware of if there's characters that do or don't do certain things. That's something you need to manage. But I actually, my experience, I guess more anecdotally and just in creating and being involved with different projects, it's far less of an issue than I think. I think because meaning the opportunity of bringing values and creating wholesome, beautiful, inspiring content, particularly in children's space. There's so much you can do. There's so much freedom. There's so much opportunity and demand for it. And whereas I don't feel like any of the people in the space are held back. There's a few things you should be cautious of, and obviously that's why you have guidance from different whoever's gonna give you advice on certain things. But it is a blue ocean really of what we're looking at with but I also say this, if we're the ones in the space who are doing it sincerely and trying to come from a space that aligns with our spiritual path sincerely, if we're not the ones doing that, then then you're going to have other people coming in the space where they just see dollar signs, and will just kind of create what they got to create. I'm pretty sure that's just the nature of a business and opportunity. So you'll have other big teams of creating content for Muslim audiences with maybe different agenda, which is just to sell. I think that we see elements of that already with bigger you know, with bigger media houses and animation houses and bringing in Muslim characters, that's not just because they're trying to be good global corporate citizens. I also think like, if we have some Muslim characters, we know that this is going to get more viewing in certain regions, and that's actually great. That's a healthy thing. But hey, wouldn't it be nice if there's more authentic characters coming and stories coming from within Muslim majority, you know, economies and companies that are also then, you know, like Omar said, kind of then exporting as well. So there's this global conversation around media and, you know, having, you know, beautifully intended content. It's done with ahsan and craft as well.
OT, have you got any sort of insight into that? I mean, from a geographical perspective as well?
I think, yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I echo exactly what Peter said. I completely agree. Like, I noticed I'm just sitting back, just nodding my head to everything he's saying, which has been enlightening. But I totally agree, because like it always begins with intent. What is it that we're trying to do out of here? And, you know, I think all creatives agree to this. You never just create something. You don't just make a show, right? It's okay, what's the idea? What is it that we're saying? What's the story? There are all these questions that we try to answer in our storytelling journey, right? And I think that's in its practice is necessary, and that's where ihsan comes to place, where our intent comes to place. And I think also in some cases, which I've heard, I know some of my colleagues would do, is they would actually approach the Islamic entity for validation and approval. Is this okay? Is this not okay? Which I think is a lovely practice as well, to just make sure that what they're creating is true to Islamic practices. The other thing is that, to what we were saying earlier, which is when we've seen global content houses, media houses that would throw in an Islamic character that, you know, previously we had the token black guy. Now we're starting to see the token Muslim guy. And some of the shows that you'll just throw in there to, you know, gain a wider audience, which is great. I'm all for business, but also I think, how are you writing that character? What is the backstory behind the character? What's the personality like? What does he do? Or he or she do? What are their practices like? How do they do things differently? An example Peter gave was, you know, if you have a girl with a hijab in Indonesia, is the hijab worn correctly? Does it also fit Indonesian culture? It's not just Islamically, right? Because girls wear hijab differently in Indonesia versus Saudi Arabia, for example. Some people only wear it black. In some cultures, it has to be black. In other cultures, they'd have it colored. Where, you know, there's Islam, and there's the nation and the people and the society culture itself that plays an important part in that narrative. So I think that when creating content, I think having an understanding is necessary, and really doing it with the idea of, I want to create something that has meaning. I want to create something that, you know, I always challenge my team where I always ask them a question: are we creating impact, or are we adding to the noise? And I think that's also an important marker, like, oh, let's create something with impact that will change people's lives. Because tomorrow, I want to be able to, if one person tells me this has changed my life in a better way, I'm content. Like, that's always sort of a big part of our goal and our target in what we do. And I think that practice plays the same part here, where if we're creating a kids show, what's our output? What's the impact I want these children to have, or the teenagers, or, you know, regardless of demographic, what do I want my show to do? What is the long lasting impact after I pass and my days on this planet is done? What do I want what am I leaving behind? What I want it to do for me, what I want it to speak for. And I think that's part of the thought process that we always have. And I think that's necessary for all content creators, and all Muslim content creators, to always think of that.
I think that's really well said, Omar. Yeah, it's broadening our understanding of success, you know, and this is not just in, you know, content in the media space, but, you know, in particularly this year, there's, you know, more and more question marks about what our what experiences are being designed, you know, that how they affect us, designed for addiction, or definitely no overconsumption, environmental concern. We know there's a lot of things that are just not sustainable or healthy for human beings, you know, for many different layers to that. And so more broadly, you know, as a people, you know, I'd love to see what are, you know, Muslim entrepreneurs, creators, investment, you know, together how are we contributing to, correcting that trajectory by design through what we're creating, not just our content, but our products, how they're served, how people use those and consume those things. That's our opportunity. So, but I also think that's where our faith really helps guide us, because we have, some really strong guidelines of like, being lightly on the earth, being mindful of and appreciative of, of people's, encouraging them to be in a state of remembrance and dhikr, and reflect on the beauty of God's creation and nature, and like, all the things that are kind of timeless, universal, but we have to design for that, as well as create commercially attractive and sustainable products that will bring the capital that is needed to build, stronger, healthy companies together. So, this ecosystem working together, that's why I call it like a webinar like this, even though it's simple. And I appreciate there's still, 50 people listening in and others who are listen later. Like, thank you. Like, it really is a human effort. It's not just going to happen in boardrooms and people drawing charts and some big corporate agenda. I think it's people like us, just with sincerity, trying to build, knowing also if we have this understanding of barakah, or blessings around design, it might take time, it might take a generation, but we've got to do the work now, because, we just keep planting the seeds, keep doing that step by step. And then, I think, it's a matter of time before we'll see very beautiful results from that. I hope. I'm very optimistic about it.
Sinan, could you give the last comment, the last word? We're going to wrap up the webinar soon.
Right, cool. Really insightful discussion, to be honest. I love what I hear. I'm learning a lot from everyone, actually. I think for me, it's for me, I'm very simple. It's about niyat, and also what value do we create for people. And I think as a content creator, one of the biggest mistakes which we do is we always think that our idea is always the best, and we don't listen to input and feedback from other people. So I think that's one angle which I always tell myself and always tell my team, that being candid and accepting input is something very, very important, especially in content creating, right? But last words for this webinar, I think the landscape is huge, right? I echo whatever Peter and Omar said, that the opportunities are huge. There was a question saying that, hey, Sinan, it's not just about education, investors want profit. And definitely, and I mean, the population, the size of the market is huge. It's just how do you unlock that? How do you create value until the consumers want to exchange their currency, their money, to the value you give? And cartoons are cartoons. Again, Disney is making a lot of money through merchandising and events and theme parks and stuff. Why can't we do that? Why can't we be the alternative? We definitely can. But on top of that, what Peter said also is that the new world, I mean the world now, right? There's so many other opportunities. We don't have to follow that existing model and creating subscriptions or creating beautiful designs and concepts and products which may not exist yet, and monetizing it digitally or finding other ways. So I think in general we're heading in the right direction, right? There's a lot of content creators. Again, another shout out to investors who are here, not just us. I mean, there's a lot of us here, and wanting to create the right impact, and also profits, of course, and opportunities are there, right? Just waiting again to do collaborations, and we don't know even from this discussion, like Peter said, and we've been on the phone before, but things have changed, and you don't know what's going to happen even between us. So I think let's stay positive, right? There's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of passion going around, and wishing all the best for everyone in this industry.
Thanks, Sinan. Those are great words to end on. Optimistic, looking to the future, and despite all the unknown unknowns right now and the new normal, it's been fascinating to hear from everybody their thoughts and where things could go and what needs to be picked up on and taken forward to push things to the sort of the next level. Maybe we should convene again in a year, see how it's all gone.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
I think
everybody,
having
for
it's a
tuning
team,
in.
it's a team effort. Oh, sorry. As you say, yes, it's a team effort.
Yeah.
Even everyone listening in, it's really a shared effort. Everyone has a role to play in it. And don't discount your own efforts and inspiration and talent. There's we're all really trying to work on the same team. In this space, I think. It's just a matter of time before, we have some really beautiful results, but working together and, but doing that, bringing out Ihsan and Nia to it. But, being creative, being imaginative, creating new business models, looking at our tools and opportunities we have through our networks, our creativity, our imagination, and knowing that, we really, we're put here to do something meaningful, let's do it. So anyway, I feel like I've said too much the whole webinar, guys. So forgive me for, after midnight, I'm getting too excited about, deeper things. But guys, it's been a great chat, and I appreciate Paul, you hosting us, and everyone for tuning in. It was really nice to chat with you, Omar and Sinan. Great, amazing work you're doing, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Omar, your last few words.
My last few words. Well, I mean, first off, I think it's been a great pleasure and an honor to meet everybody on the panel, Sinan, and seeing the work that you guys have been doing, which is amazing. Sometimes I feel like we find ourselves in our own little cocoon, and we forget that there are other people doing amazing work. So connecting with people globally that have been doing incredible work, like such as yourselves, is amazing. So thank you for the opportunity and for the chance to share our opinions and what's happening on this side of the world. And I think that, to echo what the guys have said, I think it is Ihsan, it's Nia, and it's Nia of what's the impact, to go back to that, which is what is it that we're looking to cause. And we do all have an important role to play. And for the investors, I mean, an investor's point for the most part is I'm investing to get cash back. So otherwise it's an NGO, right? It's not a business investment. It's always businesses for profit, which we understand. So there's how do we create value for investors? How do we develop a formula that can show them what they're getting back in return over time? And this is something that I think, as we've learned that in our own ways, advertising, merchandising, creating new pieces of content, finding creative ways to bring in income that breaks out of the norm, that does not follow necessarily what has been created before us, because these models have been there for hundreds of years. Now the digital economy has shifted that, and we can create new models to generate income. So that's something I think to keep in mind when we're packaging our ideas for potential investments. And intellectual property licensing, I think in a lot of ways that's what Sinan was talking about. When we develop intellectual property, when you create your characters, now you can license that across the world, and that's forms of revenue to look into as well. So with that being said, I think we all have a lot to do, and the time could not be better than where we are right now, because technology, communication, internet, we're privileged to have access to each other and privileged to have access to create. And that facility gives us all an incredible space to develop from, and with the hopes to be able to change the world for the better. As small, as micro as it might be, the aim is to always try to change the world for the better.
Dude, there's a great word to end on. Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. And thank you to the audience for tuning in.